A tough Saturday seems to lie ahead for Ferrari. At the end of the first day of track activity, the results were quite clear. Charles Leclerc placed 6th, while Lewis Hamilton was 11th in qualifying simulations. The outlook for Sunday could improve, however, as the long runs, somewhat surprisingly, placed both Ferrari cars just behind the McLarens. This gave rise to some smiles among the many fans already at Imola on Friday. The overall picture remained challenging, as Charles Leclerc, still slightly unwell after having a fever the day before, confirmed at the end of the day. The Monegasque admitted it was hard to say, but he honestly felt that securing the front row would be very difficult for them. According to him, the second row would already be an excellent result, although at the moment the team was targeting the third row if things went well. He said he hoped for a miracle, which would mean reaching the second row. Charles Leclerc also pointed out that the work done between the two practice sessions had gone in the right direction. He explained that FP1 had been complicated, with some difficulties during the session, but that things improved in FP2, even though performance was still lacking. He also downplayed the long-run results, noting that their race pace had seemed decent, but Imola is a track where overtaking was particularly difficult. He stated that the current weak point was qualifying performance, and that would be the team's priority in their evening work ahead of the next day. Still, the timing sequence shown by the two Ferrari cars on full fuel was of interest, even though the number of laps wasn't enough, due to a red flag caused by Isaac Hadjar going off track, to assess how tire degradation would play a role. Both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton had complained of brake issues, a problem that emerged while braking into Turn 1. This was repeatedly highlighted over team radio during the qualifying simulation and lessened somewhat during the long runs. Engineer Brian Bozzi responded to Charles Leclerc over the radio, stating they knew where to intervene for the next day. However, Lewis Hamilton seemed to suffer more from the issue, which was not new when it came to Ferrari's braking system. The Briton explained that FP2 had proven more demanding, as he struggled to find consistent performance. He said they would analyze the data collected that evening, but that the team had completed its program, including long runs, and now had a good amount of information to work with. Ferrari appeared on the defensive, and the findings from the day didn't provide a foundation on which to build hopes of a podium finish, a goal reserved for anyone not driving a McLaren. The impression was that the Scuderia would have to focus on damage limitation. After FP2, Ferrari was also penalized by the stewards for an oversight during the first free practice session. Mechanics had violated Technical Directive 003Q2, G.2 by adjusting the tire pressures on Charles Leclerc's car without following the prescribed procedure. The directive requires teams to measure tire temperatures before making any adjustments. Ferrari admitted the procedure had not been followed correctly, and the Maranello team was penalized for violating Article 30.5 of the sporting regulations. After the trips outside the old continent, Formula One has therefore returned to Europe, but the first indications tell a now almost memorized script. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris in the lead, drawing up a leaderboard constantly colored papaya. So the same results from Miami are repeated. An initial outcome that is not surprising, because even in Imola, what emerged is the overall strength of the Woking car, its versatility, the ability to be competitive in every sector of the track, without having to rely on a single element to make the difference. From this stems the 0.4 gap imposed on the other top teams, who, barring overnight miracles, especially Red Bull, which wouldn't be new to such feats, have already begun the hunt for the role of second force, with Alpine staking its claim as the fourth challenger sitting at the big table. The A525 has made straight-line speed its strong point, an aspect already observed elsewhere, but it also defends itself well in medium to high-speed corners. This characteristic of the Enstone car is not new. Already in other contexts, it had shown a good front end in faster corners, though it suffers from a certain inconsistency in qualifying. On a track considered favorable on paper, the ability to extract the final 10th remains a question mark, but Alpine's ambition is to be the surprise of the weekend, trying to join the fight among the top teams. A battle for the second-best team spot behind McLaren that promises to be extremely interesting, with the other three top teams today separated by only 75 thousandths and, drawing a line, seeing their gap from the MCL 39 widen almost in the same places. Compared to Miami, Imola does not demand such marked compromises, and this also benefits McLaren. 2 weeks ago, the strength of the Papaya car emerged mainly in the slow sections, but on the first Friday at Imola, its superiority showed in the medium to high-speed corners, displaying great front-end precision. Moreover, on a bumpy track surface, where the car must be raised to avoid bottoming, experienced by several drivers, McLaren's downforce makes the difference. In medium to high-speed corners, the MCL39 is fast and, above all, stable, easy to drive and precise on entry, yet able to bring the rear along without excessive sliding, which can make a difference not only in lap time but also in tire management, both on a single lap and over long runs. At Imola, the C6 made its debut, the softest compound in the range, which, while allowing for 2 attempts if properly cooled, still requires careful management on a single lap to avoid burning it up in the first 2 sectors. McLaren is the team best able to manage this aspect, even though it is not immune. Lando Norris had to abort his final attempt due to oversteer in the last corner, after trying to improve in the first 2 sectors. The 2 McLaren drivers took slightly different approaches. Oscar Piastri stood out in the first 2 sectors but struggled in the final part, while Lando Norris, in his first flying lap, excelled precisely in Sector 3. A further confirmation of the compromises demanded by the C6, which McLaren nonetheless seems to manage better than other teams. Data analysis clearly shows McLaren's superiority in medium to high-speed sections. For example, a 7 km/h advantage in the first chicane over Ferrari and Red Bull, a sign of how well McLaren carries speed into and through corners. Charles Leclerc specifically worked on this in FP2, adjusting his braking phase to optimize corner entry. Mercedes was much further back, sacrificing entry to favor exit toward the Villeneuve. Here again, McLaren's strength stands out, effective both in entry and traction, with better acceleration out of turn 5. The same theme repeats at Villeneuve, where the advantage remains 5 km/h over Mercedes and 7 over Ferrari. This is one of 3 corners, along with Piratella and Acminerali, identified by Charles Leclerc as key areas to improve corner entry to take a step forward for qualifying. In fact, the data shows the lack of incisiveness the Monegasque driver referred to. At Piratella, for example, the SF25 was the slowest among the top teams, 12 km/h down on the McLaren. But will that be enough to make real progress? Charles Leclerc believes Ferrari has the potential for the 3rd or 2nd row, and Frédéric Vasseur also emphasized the importance of qualifying at the 4.909-kilometer Autodromo Internazionale Enzo Edino Ferrari, especially on a track where grid position carries significant weight. Curiously, regarding Ferrari, at Tosa, the slowest section along with the Variante Alta, the performance deficit was not as large as expected, confirming that perhaps the Italian side opted for a compromise setup to avoid sacrificing the medium-slow sections too much, which is reflected in the lack of incisiveness in the medium to high-speed corners. McLaren's strength lies precisely in combining these elements, both on single laps and over race distance, where the practice references were heavily influenced by traffic, although the 2 Papayas still appear to have something extra. Both George Russell and Max Verstappen were overtaken by the 2 McLaren MCL39 cars in race simulations, even though the Dutchman had gone out on track earlier. Nonetheless, McLaren starts as the heavy favorite and, barring overnight miracles, has already staked its claim to seal the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix weekend.